Hello everyone, welcome back to the Gospel of John in 5 minutes. Today is day 30 and we're reading all of chapter 15. So grab your Bible and read along with us.
I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch of mine that bears no fruit, he takes away, and every branch that bears fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. You are already made clean by the word which I have spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. He who abides in me, and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. For apart from me you can do nothing. If a man does not abide in me, he is cast forth as a branch and withers. And the branches are gathered, thrown into the fire and burned. If you abide in me, and my words abide in you, ask whatever you will, and it shall be done for you. By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit, and so prove to be my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments, and abide in his love. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be full. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. No longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you my friends. For all that I have heard from my Father I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should abide, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give it to you. This I command you, to love one another. If the world hates you, know that it has hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love its own. But because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of this world, therefore the world hates you. Remember the word that I said to you, a servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will persecute you. If they kept my word, they will keep yours also. But all this they will do to you on account, because they do not know him who sent me. If I had not come and spoken to them, they would not have sin. But now they have no excuse for their sin. He who hates me hates my Father also. If I had not done among them the works which no one else did, they would not have sin. But now they have seen and hated both me and my Father. It is to fulfill the word that is written in their law. They hated me without a cause. But when the Consoler comes, whom I shall send to you from my Father, even the Spirit of truth, who proceeds from the Father, he will bear witness to me. And you also are witnesses, because you have been with me from the beginning.
Okay, everyone. So today we continue this Last Supper discourse of Jesus. And again, as I mentioned a few days ago, even though John doesn't explicitly mention the bread and the wine and the body and the blood, there's clear allusions to that idea in John's head, that Jesus is clearly doing something at the Last Supper. He's establishing a new covenant, a new commandment, a new sacrament. In a certain sense, Jesus is doing what all of the great figures of Israel's history have done. At the point of their death, they are preparing their children for the future. Like in Genesis 49, Jacob gathered his 12 sons, and he appointed his son Judah to be the one in charge after his death. Likewise, later on, Moses, the book of Deuteronomy, gave his last will and testament, and he gathered the representatives of the 12 tribes of Israel around him, and he gave them his last discourse, which we now call the book of Deuteronomy, preparing them for what to do after his death and appointing his successor Joshua as the one in charge. Likewise, at the end of the book of Joshua, Joshua did the same thing. He gathered the 12 tribes of Israel around him, and he gave them the platform for how to carry on in his absence, and he renewed the covenant that Moses had made. Jesus is doing the same thing with the disciples in the Last Supper discourse. He's preparing them for his passing and giving them instruction for how to carry on his ministry in the future. And over again, we heard this word in chapter 15, abide. Abide in me and I in you. Can you remember any other time in the Gospel of John when we heard this word abide? It was in chapter 6. Right? A year before the Passover of Jesus. Remember, he gave that huge, long bread of life discourse. And in that same discourse, he gave instructions for how to abide in him. Here's what he says, chapter 6, verse 56. He who eats my flesh and drinks my blood abides in me, and I in him. Again, when he's telling the disciples to abide in him, and that they will abide in him, he's telling them to do it through the eating of his flesh and drinking of his blood. Now, last thing I want to point out about this is this last part that Jesus says in chapter 15. If the world hates you, know that it has hated me first. If you were of the world would love its own. But because you are not of the world, I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. He who hates me hates my Father also. Notice, Jesus gives a whole section here about how the world will hate us if we're truly following what he asks. All throughout the Bible, the great prophets of old, all of them were persecuted by the world. Something that we should remember for us as Catholics. If we're in a position where we've never made any enemies for the Gospels, if we've been too cowardly to truly speak the truth and truly be prophets, then we're probably not fulfilling the mission of Jesus. Jesus assures his disciples, if they truly follow his words and his commandments, they will be persecuted. They will be hated. And so we should take courage as well. Join us again tomorrow for day 31 as we begin chapter 16.